Thursday edition of the Mystery Wine Blind Tasting. I'm Neal, your host for this evening's festivities, in partnership with this little number right here. A beautiful red wine that has a ton of aromatics, concentrated ones, richer ones that evoke kind of this cooler time of year. So well chosen by Julie, I'm sure, as is typically the case. If you are joining us this evening, let me know and chime in. Tell me what you're seeing and smelling and tasting this evening. We'll get to do this again as we do each month. So we've been busy here preparing for Thanksgiving, which we're nearly full for, I think, if not fully full for at this moment. It's kind of an exciting time of year in my mind. It's the time of year that celebrates exactly what we're about. Gathering around a table with food and drink, connecting with people, forming community. And so I like to call it the Super Bowl of hospitality that is Thanksgiving. So perhaps this number right here would go well with your Thanksgiving table. We'll find out as we taste this more. There's a real concentration to it. Let's see here If you are participating here, let me know. I'm smelling some wonderful things in this wine, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's so alluring, it's pulling me in. Great. Sorry for the delay there. My comments were lagging a little bit, but Christine, hello to you. So exciting that you could join us this evening all the way from Michigan. The wine traveled with my wife, I think, to a family gathering last week, and Christine is her aunt. So the Kubitskis are with us from Pennsylvania. Hello, everybody. And Rob and Kathy, good evening to you. Curtis from Fredericksburg, we're all over tonight. It's really exciting. That's great. Greg, thank you for dropping by, and you picked it up this evening. Perfect. Well, as I said, I'm getting ahead of myself with respect to the nose because it's kind of compelling. But, and Cindy's here too. Hi, my favorite mother-in-law. Absolutely. I have a few. No, I don't. She is definitely my favorite mother-in-law. Even some locals from Effingham. Hey guys, wonderful to have you with us. Renee is also with you. Great, Curtis and Renee, welcome. So what do you see when you're tasting this little number? As you swirl this wine, it's what color? Kind of red do you see? Is it a red, light red of the spectrum? Does it go into purple, almost bluish? Is it light in intensity? Is it more robust and deep? Can you see sort of a newsprint through it? Could you see, print on a page? Can you see your own hand through it? Or is it so opaque and deep and dense that you can't? Both things would tell you something about the wine. And in this case, I think we're looking at a deeper, darker, richer wine. Very deep. Julie, I agree. You can't see through it, right? It's got real intensity to it. And what you're doing when you're doing that, right, is you're just looking at kind of over the top of it, looking through it. You can put something underneath it. And can you see that? I can barely, no, I can't. I can't make out anything. For example, my wedding ring there doesn't show up throughout this. This wine has a deep garnet kind of quality to it, which both Robert and Sarah are noting. Thank you, guys. I agree. Reagan, welcome from DC. So we're DC, Pennsylvania. We're Michigan. We're all over the place. It's great. It's really exciting. I was speaking to a group of people yesterday, leaders in Fauquier County, and we were talking about the impact and the power of a medium like this to further hospitality when the guests themselves don't necessarily come through your doors on a regular basis, or if they do, they're there infrequently, but can still gather and form a level of community by way of the online place. And that's what we get to do each Thursday. This was one of those examples I got to point to as how it does work and how neat that is. So Greg's noting the dark color similar to Petit Verdot or Tannat. I think that's a great point, right? And so what we learn from a deep color is that it's a potential for some varietals. Petit Verdot into not being thick-skinned varietals, ones that grow with intensity, that when allowed to sit with the juices, extract some of that color and some tannin potentially, which we'll be able to verify here as we get to the tasting portion of this. But that kind of concentration wouldn't come from something like Gamay or from Pinot Noir typically, right? Or maybe even Nebbiolo, for example. And so what you're doing in this process, of course, is identifying what it might be, ideally, of course, what it will be, but we don't get to what it is until we really rule out more of what it's not. So already off the bat, just by the color and the intensity of it, we're kind of saying, I don't think it's in the Pinot Noir Gamay spectrum. You don't have to rule it out 100%, but you're definitely thinking about what it might not be. Oh, well, Curtis should be welcome here at any time, for sure. And I love that the Kubitskis make their way down with a frequency enough to pick up a number of wines and then go back up to Pennsylvania, and they continue to play. It's a high point for sure, and it's an extension of what we are. Christine's getting me ahead, prompting me to stop talking about other things other than this wine, and I appreciate that. So it's got heavy legs. So as you swirl, it's going to form a rim at the top of wherever the liquid reaches, wherever the wine reaches, and then it's going to start to cry, or the tears are going to form. And if they stay there, they're forming legs. And are those legs substantial? How long does it take for the tears to form, and how long does it take for them to go down? If they're moving slowly, almost syrupy-like, you're looking at something that indicates a potential higher alcohol or maybe some residual sugar, which is an indication potentially of a riper place. At the very least, a ripe site, maybe in a cool place, but a ripe vintage, something riper. Could be vintage, could be place, could just be locale in general. What that helps you to determine is already you can say, I don't think I should probably say this is from a cool site, cool vintage Gamay from Beaujolais, for example. Chris and Courtney, good evening. Hello to you guys. Welcome. Spice, blackberry, and maybe some black currant. So you guys are getting into the nose, which is awesome. As I noted earlier, it's hard not to. This is a very compelling nose. So let's do that. We've got a profile built so far that is ripe, deep garnet color, kind of opaque. You can't see through it. So it's got a density and intensity to that. Real quick, you see any variation on the rim? Any kind of color difference from here, the outside rim, to the interior? That would be an indication perhaps of some age. So if you get a kind of browning quality to the outside portion of this, if you see a real watery rim, that could also be an indication of some more of an alcoholic element there. I'm not seeing too much there, but a tiny bit. Certainly not a color variation. Chris, no problem. You can always play the commentary and be color commentary for us, and then ride the wave of the commentary to figure out what this might be. Sometimes that's proven to be better than actually tasting the wine in terms of the final guess of what the wine might be. But going back to Julie and Greg, they're already in the nose camp. What else do you guys smell? Looking, of course, for fruit, earth, and wood. Fruit being what caliber of fruit? And we've got spice, blackberry, black currant, so deep black kind of fruits. Bottle shape for Chris. Tons of spices, Sarah saying, maybe some cedar. So earth and wood. So skipping over earth for a moment to talk about wood, those spices, that cedar element, are all indications of potentially some wood. Why? Because when you're toasting a barrel, when you're toasting oak, the caramelization of the sugars that are in that oak stave, the slat that is on the outside of the barrel, creates what are kind of experienced as a spicy note or spice notes. Think of holiday spice, cardamom, cinnamon, clove, things of that sort. Sometimes you pick up cedar as an expression of sort of that dried, tight grain French oak, less so of an American oak. You get more of that dill, kind of vanillin quality from American oak. But Candy, I like your note there too. That's what really was most striking about the first snip when I put my nose in the glass, and it was that fig, raisin, dry fruit, the dry fruit quality that's here, which is, I think, an indication of the character of the fruit, right? So I think you're quite right about the dark black fruit, but the character of that fruit is that it's it's been sun-kissed, dried, it's been desiccated a little bit to the point where it's not fresh, it's not tart in expression. So that leads me to more of a warm site, a richer place. So for a counterpoint, we're talking about Portugal and Spain than we're talking about, say, Austria or Germany. I don't think you're going to get that sort of raisiny character. Think of Amarone, for example, or Valpolicella that's been kind of Ripasso styled, the concentration or raisination of the fruit being the important part of the tell from the nose. So we've got dark fruit that's raisinated or dried. We've got garnet color. We've got intensity of legs, which suggests sort of a higher alcohol, and that's kind of indicated perhaps by this thicker skinned, raisiny quality of fruit. Candy and Kevin are saying Portugal and Spain. I'm not opposed to that at all. So we're starting to build this profile, right? We're thinking of a warmer climate place where you've got real ripeness, like Portugal, Spain, maybe part of Italy, for example. We're kind of in the old world by what we're talking about there. Could this be California, for example, New World? Could it be part of the Barossa Valley in Australia? Could it be other places where you get real warmth, some places in, say, South Africa? Yes, those are all potentially in the running, especially at the initial phases where you haven't tried the wine yet. You're creating that profile, but what you're putting away are things like, I don't think I'm tasting wines from the northern climes. I'm not necessarily tasting places that are cool in orientation. So you can take away a Barolo and Barbaresco. We can take away, like I said, Germany and Austria. We can probably take away Burgundy in this context, just by way of the color and the expression. I don't know that we would be talking about, say, the Loire Valley and Cabernet Franc. We're probably not necessarily talking about Virginia, for example, although potentially, but not as typically with respect to the fruit character here. Okay, we could be absolutely talking about Argentina. I think more Argentina than, say, Chile, but potentially. So we have a lot of options at the moment. Let's taste this wine. With your first taste, of course, just as your first smell, take note of whatever jumps to mind, whatever's real prominent. Like, for example, I am salivating. This is beautifully acidic. I mean, it has a brightness in the acidity that is surprising relative to the idea that it was going to be real raisiny, kind of dense, rich. And that's lovely. So the acidity is high, medium plus. The raisiny fruit is there. Think about the texture for a moment. Think about the tannin expression and the acidity. So the taste components of the wine as opposed to the flavor components of the wine. Certainly you're picking up the notes of flavor by way of the raisiny fruit from Julie and crew, peppery notes from Candy and Kevin, Southern Europe for him, maybe Syrah with that peppery quality coming in, black tea notes, raisiny fruits. There's whole bunches of qualities of flavor, but from the taste standpoint, is this a light, medium, or robust wine? Is this that, as we've talked about many times, is it skim milk, 2% milk, or whole milk? Is it very tannic, super drying sensation all over your gums? Is it less so? And where is the acidity at in this wine? Is it really bright, kind of ripping acidity, sucking on a lemon or lime? Or is it more neutral? And where in the middle might it be if it's not one of those? What does the oak present too? We talked about the spice profile that we smelled on the wine. And do you pick up that and the sort of, usually the sort of lingering experience of the wine? So medium plus body and alcohol. Curtis, thanks for the note there on the alcohol. They're interlinked, alcohol and body, right? The higher the alcohol, usually the higher the mouthfeel and the richness. 1 degree of alcohol from, say, 12 to 13% or 13 to 14 really can make a huge difference relative to how it sits and feels in your mouth. Julie, I can relate to the frustration where you feel like you've tasted this grape before, but you can't put your finger exactly on that. That happens all the time, like once a month on Thursdays usually. So this particular wine with that medium plus intensity of body, a bit or higher alcohol, but it's not wearing the alcohol in a way that's so hot. Like when you sip it, it doesn't burn on the way back up. It has quite a bit of flavor. The black tea element's really nice. So working with this profile, all of these extra elements beyond just sort of the fruit have in the past sort of typically led us to the old world as opposed to the new world. It expresses in that way. The acidity that's here, I think, also tips your hand toward something old world versus new. But as we've talked about many times, there are new world spots that have an old world expression to some points, and certainly producers that can play that way. And then, of course, you've got old world producers that have ripeness and richness now that are more new world in their orientation. Greg, to your question, have I tasted each of these specific wines prior to this point? There's a possibility, but not a guarantee, and I don't know. So for example, if Julie found these wines in the process of our Thursday tastings with our producers, with our distributors, then she might have made a note and I might have tried it, but I wouldn't know that she's made a note to select it for this. And because we're months ahead, she might be ordering now this wine, for example. If she placed an order today, for example, it would be for, April's tasting. So I wouldn't encounter it again for 4 or so months. So if I've tasted this, and that's the embarrassing part at some points where, yes, I have, and I don't recall it, then all the better. It's reminding me, that first sniff that jumped out for me was reminding me more of sort of that Ripasso, northeastern Italy kind of characteristic. And with the acidity that's there too, that I think dovetails nicely with that raisiny character that's coming out in this particular wine. It sends me to Italy in that regard. Julie has got the old world climate and Southern Italy. Southern Italy is not a bad call either there, like something like Aglianico or Montepulciano we've tried before. We've typically gotten a little bit more tannin and structure from Montepulciano, and I don't know about that here. Something else from Puglia, perhaps. That raisiny character, though, seems relatively intentional. Petit Syrah, Tempranillo from Spain, getting some of that raisiny element for sure. Portugal giving us some of that potential character there too. Portuguese red blend. So let's think about blend. Is this more one note, or is this, and by one note, I'm not denigrating this in any way. Think about a beautiful solo of one particular instrument versus a trio or a quartet, where you have some potentially discordant elements, but that they harmonize together in the blend. But they represent ideas in the wine where you've got high acidity and super raisiny fruit. So maybe it's different picks of the same grape, or it could be different varietals that present in a different way. Chris, Senso can have like a little bit lighter character, generally speaking, not always. And it has the acidity, but maybe not quite the raisiny element that I'm picking up here. Tempranillo is an option, and so maybe we go with not necessarily Rioja, but somewhere warm, La Mancha kind of, and those tea elements, the black tea, Cabernet kind of quality, but this doesn't present in a way that reflects Cabernet for me. I agree, Greg. There's that really fascinating quality of pretty persistent, like right from the beginning all the way through the end. In fact, the end is carried by acidity. And I'm salivating. Like this is medium plus acid, but the flavors of the fruit are raisiny and rich. And I was almost expecting, by way of our description on the visual and certainly by the nose, that we would have a bit more density in the way of tannin. a bit more extraction. And we don't necessarily. It's a robust wine. I would say this is medium plus wine, right? Like we talked about. But, This is the point at which within the next minute or two, the wine typically changes. So I'm going to pour a touch more to see if there's a shift in this wine, and does it reveal anything else. That extra time oftentimes brings something out. Oh yeah, that earthy element, the meaty element. A Rhone blend, absolutely characterize potential there. We had the pepperiness from Syrah. You could get Grenache from some of that acidity and fruit, Mourvèdre for some of this meatiness and richness. So a classic kind of Rhone blend of Grenache and Syrah, Mourvèdre, or the GSM blend. You could have a sprinkle of Cinsault in there, of course. Julie had hers decanted over now 50 minutes ago, so it is a more involved place. Greg, thanks for the note about the pyrazines. Not getting pyrazine, but you're getting more like black pepper notes is what I understood from the last comment about pepper, because I'm not picking up that green pepper element. So that would take me away from Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon. So less about Bordeaux, less about the Loire Valley, much more about Syrah, Grenache, maybe a Corvina blend from up there. I'm still hanging on to the Ripasso element. It's starting to dance a little bit more on the palate. It's kind of opening and broadening. Just recently got a new mattress, and they now, vacuum seal them and they roll them up, and all the air is sucked out. And as soon as you cut the seal, like it just and then lofts. And that's sort of at the 20-minute mark after I poured a bit more, this wine went from sort of a dense, compressed thing to lofting. And the lofting quality about it is very pleasing. It adds sort of a layer of experience to the wine texturally, but also kind of allows some aeration of the integral parts that we were tasting and picking out from those sort of savory spice notes and some of the dried figgy notes and some of that tea note, and all that seems a bit more lifted. So Julie's going to plant her flag with Tempranillo, and I'm assuming Julie then from Spain. There's kind of like a roasted pumpkin quality, or that just carved pumpkin that you've done and created those little figure eyes and the ghoulish smile, and then you put the candle inside, and that candle burns the inside flesh of the pumpkin. There's kind of that note. Christine, I bet you're enjoying this. This is kind of right up your alley. You like these richer reds. Okay. Texas Tempranillo. Ooh, cool. Nice. Educate us, Julie. What's a chaparral note? It's a fantastic word, a great tasting word. So based on what we've said so far, we're headed toward a description of a richer, more robust wine. One that demonstrates a character of medium plus body with kind of a garnet character to it. It has a viscosity by way of its legs and tiers. It showcases kind of red but more dark fruit that's raisiny in profile. It has herbal notes. It has spice notes. It has the characteristics of sort of a tea kind of note. So more that herbal goes into black tea. It doesn't have much in the way of oak expression on the palate. It doesn't have a ton of tannin. It's softer, but it has a vibrant acidity. And it's alluring. No age, really, that's to speak of. It's pretty consistent from the rim inside. There's a tiny bit of a watery meniscus with a touch of alcohol. I don't think it has the Cabernet character, as Christine's pointing out right now. Italian blend, Spanish, Portuguese, the rain in the desert, rain on the plain in the desert of Texas, maybe not. Although that would be fascinating, right? If we got a chance to try sort of that old world expression idea in a new world place like, say, Texas. I would not put that past Julie in any way. So I think if I have to plant a flag, and some are saying Southern France, some are saying a sort of GSM blend from the Languedoc, some are saying Tempranillo from Spain, some are saying potentially a Portuguese red blend. Sanso was thrown out earlier too. Warm Mediterranean, a good catch-all kind of descriptor, a bucket for us to just lob our guess into. I'm going to stick with my first kind of thought. And I think I can explain it enough with respect to sort of northeastern Italy and the Veneto. So near Venice, you've got Corvina and Molinara and Rondinella, and they do a style of wine that can be done by way of raisinating the fruit and pressing that. And what you get as a result is a almost nectar liquid that you can make a Recioto di Suave, kind of a sweet wine, or you can make an Amarone, or the bitter one, the deep, dark, rich one. But when you've pressed those raisin skins, they add those back into a fresh press of the Corvina and the Molinara that hasn't been raisinated. And that's called a ripasso, or repassing that pressed raisiny skin. And that's kind of where I'm headed. So I'm going to say a fairly youthful 2019, 2020, 3-year-old, 2 to 4-year-old ripasso from the Veneto Corvina blend. Anybody else want to add anything else? Curtis is with me on that. Greg saying GSM blend from the Rhone. I like that too. You can make a very strong argument for that. I'm going to be that little cedar note that we got from the wood. It's kind of present, but it's not super present. So I was looking for more maybe American oak element. If we were going to hang out in Spain, Portugal could absolutely happen. I'm not focusing on that as much, that acidity and the brightness. Although there's some really fantastic wines we're just starting to taste here now from more of Portugal, where you get higher elevation, you're a little bit more inland. It's neat stuff with great complexity. So cool. All right. I'm sticking my way through Italy in Ripasso, but we'll see. Oh man. So back, Greg, to your question of have I tried this before? I have. Boy, am I floored by that. I remember tasting it and thinking this is really unique and different and never going to try this again because it doesn't really exist again. But this is Malbec. This is Malbec from Sicily. Pellegrino is a really neat, not related to the water family, but a neat family that's producing all over Sicily. We've carried a couple of their wines in the past. Their Nero d'Avola, for example, we've poured by the glass here. And they have some Malbec planted, and it's compelling and interesting, isn't it? I mean, where do you have a reference point for Malbec from Sicily, or from really anywhere in Italy, for that matter? Italian Malbec. Did not see that coming either, Sarah. And I've seen this before. So there's the evidence of do I always recall exactly a taste memory? No, but going back to the earlier point, I think I've tasted this before. I knew something about this, but I didn't recall exactly what it was. There's a sweetness to the fruit now. Like there's the raisiny fruit, but there's kind of a sweet quality to it. Sometimes Malbec gives you that blue fruit element, but it's not blue here. It's just a concentration to it, and it's warm, right? This is a warm spot. It's a neat wine. Julie, I understand your comment there relative to not being a Malbec fan. This is neither kind of a typical Italian wine nor a typical Malbec, so it's atypically a Malbec that's from Italy. And that, I don't know, anybody necessarily would pick out Malbec. Sometimes you have those flash moments where you have tried something before and you're like, I think this is that, and you can pull that out, but not tonight for me. This is a really neat wine. So 2020, it is relatively in the younger side. This is 13.5% alcohol. So even though it had a kind of rich display of legs and tears, it's not the hugest wine. It doesn't have a 14.5% alcohol. And I think part of that higher elevation coastal element per Sicily, you're going to get an acidity here, which is neat. So a really cool wine that none of us knew, and all the better for it, because now we can say we've tried a Malbec from Sicily. Cheers to Julie on that one, and to all of you for participating this evening. Thank you for playing along. Now you get to sit back and drink the rest of this. That's not so bad. Cheers, everybody. If I don't get a chance to see you before Thanksgiving, happy Super Bowl of hospitality to you. And I look forward to seeing you, if not after that point, then certainly hopefully on our next tasting as we venture into December and the continuation of the holidays. Until then, be well, and I'll taste with you soon.